Is Azhag the Slaughterer any good in patch 6.1.2? I've been waiting forever and a day to do this video because Azhag was missing some stuff, and now he has it. So let's take a good look because he sure is a pain to other lords in that packed region when he's AI. How can he fare as a player-run menace? With upkeep of 300 gold per turn, Azhag enters at 5,221 health on Ultra Scale. Armor is 70, no shield, which is inferior to the Orc War Boss in that regard. Standard 15% missile resistance. Leadership of 72 is fairly solid. Speed 36 and charge speed 45 are normal. Melee attack 60 is solid. Attack interval of 4 is standard. Medium splash target size is cavalry on down, and max targets damaged is 4. Melee defense is only 36. That's 10 worse than a generic war boss. Guess the shield matters for that. Weapon strength for 120 is split between base 125 and armor piercing 295, so that's heavily in favor of armor bashing. Charge bonus of 50 and mass of 800 are plausible considering this is a caster too. Mostly later. On Skullmuncha, upkeep is 400 per turn, health rises to 7,008, armor remains 70. Missile resistance 25. Speed 110 and charge speed 120 in the air are what we'd expect of this wyvern. Melee attack default is lowered to 50 and is poisoned with each hit. Attack interval 4, splash target size large so ogres on down, and max targets damaged is 5. Melee defense slips to 32 base, weapon strength rises to 480, split base 175, and AP 305. Charge bonus 80, and mass 2300. Already a siege attacker, he inflicts fear and terror in this form. So far, so good. As a legendary lord faction leader, Enthralled by Evil provides plus 40 diplomatic relations with all vampire factions and Arcane the Black, immunity to vampiric attrition for all armies. This is new enough stuff to affect his army alone is obsolete, and explains why corruption did nothing when the jerk turned on me when I was playing Isabella. That plus 40 only works for him, not for you. Remember that. Also, plus 2 to hero capacity to Giant River Troll Hags, which I didn't make good use of really early on myself, but I repented for that and tried otherwise. And minus 10% to Winds of Magic cost for all death spells for all characters in the faction, so Spirit Leech basic version, no upgrades, would be 7 wins instead of 8, which is a good start when you have a passive that restores power reserve. As a general, Slaughterer changes the basic WA to Ahzag's WOG, providing the usual 18 seconds of glory, plus 24 melee attack and plus 25% weapon strength, also imbuing units with causes fear and causes terror, even if they're ordinary goblins. His personal army has full-time immunity to psychology, which is nice, and plus 25% income from sacking settlements, and that's for Azhag alone. Paying the bills is a bit of a challenge in this faction these days, in ways it was not previously, so this helps. The trick of making this video is that Azhag is essentially an Orc War Boss who gains, through a legendary item, the ability to spec into a normal line of death, otherwise no different from a Giant River Troll Hag's line. It's absolutely great to be a Flying Death caster, but the blue, red, magic, and yellow lines, yes, he gets a full melee line as well, are completely normal. So are the Orc War Boss bits in the top line. That's why I'm linking to the Orc War Boss video for all of those fundamentals. And Lore of Death will pop up somewhere too. What's different, aside from earning Skullmuncha once you grind to rank 14? At rank 11, 1 pip gets you Get On With It, which grants the passive of the same name and grants Azhag a plus 8 leadership bubble around him that is 55 meters in range, which is a bonus over and above his regular leadership effect, or outside of it, as the case may be. This makes Azhag one of the better rabble-rousers of the mob. In his very personal line, beginning at rank 12, Imbued by Madness gives Azhag minus 25% upkeep for all Orc Boys, Big Uns, their cavalry versions, and their savage orc versions, and provides frenzy to the same where not previously present. It's not like these are bad units. Frenzy makes them seriously good, and the upkeep reduction provides you a solid economic benefit. Earth-Shaking Orders further boosts orcs in Azhag's own army, granting plus 8 melee defense plus 12% speed, and to top it off, 15% missile strength for Arab boys, and I wondered who was going to buff those. Insane Visions grants plus 1 recruit capacity to shamans, and I take it that's both kinds. Hero recruit rank of plus 4 for shamans only applies to the local province. Not orky enough, representing the haters, doubters, and flamers in the comments who Azhag feeds to Skullmuncha. Provide the benefits of Vanguard deployment to all Orc boys and Big Uns infantry and cavalry savage included, which is kind of a big deal this side of Vlad. Inflicts 15% extra attrition to enemy armies under siege in the local region, which I often see on Chaos Forces, and can really help if enemies want to stay bottled up, and chance of intercepting an enemy tunneling force plus 24%. That's handy. Wild Abandon gives Azhag himself plus 8 melee attack and plus 20 charge bonus, which is good. Finally, Darkest Nimbus gives Azhag regeneration, meaning he no longer needs an actual regeneration item. Also, it probably won't stack with him anyway. Plus 15% Winds of Magic reserve capability and a single non-overcast, but free, use of Wind of Death per battle. The Crown of Sorcery, the first of 3 quest battles, yeah, Azhag goes back a long time, that's how, provides the item which unlocks his death magic line, so the free Spirit Leech and Aspect spells can be made better and stronger and, very importantly, cheaper. Control plus 5 for local province, miscast chance minus 25% permanently, and 3 normal casts of the bound spell Gaze of Nagash. When this guy becomes a Flying Lord, gets you some pretty convenient free damage. I've been on the receiving end, it's very annoying. Even more ridiculous, Azhag's Ard Armor gives armor plus 15, ward save 15%, which makes the first buff seem fair and balanced compared. Wound recovery time minus 1 turns, melee defense plus 6, and on top of the rest, physical resistance 15%, and an augment with no use limit, 120-second cooldown, 38 seconds, works on self and allies, and provides plus 24 melee defense and plus 30 armor to everyone, which is like a dare to Nurgle factions everywhere. Slaga's Slashers, which you must claim from Slaga himself, so stop that git. What do you get for your trouble? Grants post-battle loot plus 25% for Azhag only, but that's still an immense help to your legendary lord's economic production. It also provides minus 10% recruitment cost for Azhag's army specifically, so upgrading and retooling is up for grabs. The weapons provide melee attack plus 8 full-time, weapon strength plus 15% full-time, and the passive, as in full-time, plus 4 leadership and plus 8 melee attack to all allies within 35 meters, including Azhag himself. Assembling all 3 pieces of gear grants the Slaughterer's Gear set bonus, providing Azhag with plus 20 Winds reserve capacity and plus 1 control to all provinces. Before moving on, of these 3 battles, for the time when you unlock it, the Crown one is the most difficult because you have a pincer attack to deal with, or expertly bait out. That's up to your anticipation and skill mostly, but it can devolve into a big, bad brawl that will test the endurance of your army considerably. But thank goodness for wall mechanics. The second and third do not contain reinforcements that you are not made aware of prior to the battle. This makes the difficulty low. I tend to recruit some degree of missile infantry for a main greenskin army, and they will serve you very well if that's how you want to roll, but my point is, if you can do the first battle, you can probably do the others and not even break a sweat. It may take a little while, but you won't break that much of a sweat. And given the strength and power of the rewards, you absolutely should as soon as orcishly possible. So how do we use Azhag the Slaughterer? Let's get this out of the way. The standard YouTube advice is to not spec into his spells at all, given that you start with an Orc Shaman and you can recruit Troll Hags. But Troll Hags are your casualty replenishment heroes. Getting more than a single one in an army is arguably a waste, and there's lots of other heroes to fling at problems. I personally have settled on using 2. I'm just saying, this is why people recommend not to mess with his magic and to foist that onto other people. And I'm here to say, you can reject that advice as you see fit. Just the fact that Azhag starts with non-overcast Spirit Leech and Aspect of the Dread Knight are nice things that are very recent additions, but the bottom line is a Flying Lure of Death caster is not wasted effort. I'm referring to campaign here, of course. You can absolutely turn him into just another melee fighter with a flying mount, and you can succeed like that, especially with his legendary items acquired. But the very power of his legendary items means you can ignore his melee line until quite late in his leveling process, and do absolutely fine in lots of battles. Why go magic? Let's go back to the Crown of Sorcery. Minus 25% miscast chance. Combined with Earthing, this makes the chance Azhag will miscast overcast spells remarkably low, barring items like the Trickster's Shard, and he gets regeneration eventually too, so he can recover from miscasts naturally. It's in the same sense he can push it pretty far. Also, let's take a moment and talk about its custom scrap upgrade, Wizardly Weapons. For 50 scrap, if it's the first upgrade, since relatively recently you became able to put more than one scrap upgrade to overpower a single unit, you can put on Orc Boys with Spears, and Orc Boy Big Uns, and Arrow Boys, and the Rugbad's Armored Orcs Regiment of Renown, this scrap upgrade to provide your army with plus 20% Winds of Magic power recharge, and the unit with plus 6 armor-piercing melee damage per strike. This is a passive, it will only show up in the stats in battle, and the thing is that the unit has to not be wavering or routing, but remember Azhag's army has immunity to psychology too, but that's his army. The first part means it's fully half an Arcane Conduit, 2 of them is a full Arcane Conduit, and 3 of them is Greater Arcane Conduit, without the Spell Mastery part. That means more spells, more often, more of the time, and reaching max preparation for a full engagement faster than the other side, all thanks to very orky minions. The second part means you do a ton more damage. Orcs go from AP 8 to AP 14. Spears go from AP 6 to AP 12, except the bonus versus large adds a bit more against large targets. Arrow Boys go from AP 8 to AP 14 themselves, which is, kind of ridiculous. Big Uns go from AP 13 to AP 19, with a little wee more if bonus versus large applies. All of them will do even more if they're using their charge bonus and all that. So it's not just the fact it's more damage, it's that absent special resistances, it's more guaranteed damage, provided you connect, which is what Wah, Here We Go, Smash 'em Faster, and so on are for. This is so good that Black Orcs require an expensive scrap tech just to be able to slot their own AP bonus per hit in. This is something Azhag cannot just do for himself, but spread around the entire faction, and help any and all spellcasters turn their armies into magical powerhouses. Which is good because, frankly, you don't usually have that many casters. You're not Tzeentch. Endless sources of Arcane Conduit are just not to be had. Generally. So there's that. Now, let's rewind a little and talk about Big Uns, because you start with 3, and long before you can slap on Frenzy and Azhag's personal buffs, you're forced to use them to fight Ogre Bulls, Noblars, possibly a bunch of Norscan junk, and serve as your best frontline available for fighting what Ungrim has to throw at you. And they're much better than I thought I remembered them. See, what's the knock on Big Uns? The big one is very simple. No shields! Vulnerable to ranged factions. Well, what if you're fighting factions with some ranged, but it's relatively weak? Or Slayer pirates, but you have chaff to drown them so that they're not firing at you without a care. What happens then? What happens is that they utterly refuse to die. Well, I'm exaggerating slightly, but the unit health is 10,800. Entity health is 108 hit points. Starting armor of 50 holds up very well under many routine conditions, so that they take a lot of damage, but few entities die. Melee defense isn't exactly a barn burner, but it's not the complete garbage some units in the game have. And more to the point, they keep hitting. They attack a little faster than most. Melee attack starts better than most. It has a mild bonus versus large just to help deter ogres. And just in general, it hits hard. Weapon strength 42, you usually see that for like Saurus warriors. And those don't get WoW mechanics, helping mid-fight. My point is that unless they are being shot to death, massively and overwhelmingly, a few units of Big Uns basically do not die. Or rather, it takes such an overwhelming sustained effort to kill them without specialized tools that it seems to take forever. Like what? Well, like chariots. Ogres don't have chariots. The Slayer King doesn't have chariots. Vampires, should that be an issue, don't really have chariots unless it's a black coach and nobody uses them, even AI. Chaos Dwarfs kind of do, but they have to bring them. Kislev does, so watch out. My point is, okay, I thought they were decent. This was quietly insane. I repeat, this was my experience before Azhag starts buffing them out of the ears. Now, they're not perfect. And for all their hard hitting, that's over the long haul. That doesn't mean that they're fast about it. I'm just saying, I've come to appreciate that they may have more armor but a little less health than Plague Bearers of Nurgle, and that's a lot more meat to have to fight through. My enemies were not up to the task in the early game at all, more or less. I mean, really overwhelming numbers and all that stuff, yes. Now, this general advice does break down when fighting something really specialized that can and will outfight them like Norscan Berserkers or Slayers reinforced by a Rune Lord. If you ambush an Ungrim army, rather than, fighting with a massive wall or fighting with 2 full armies or whatever. I first learned this with Vlad and relearned it here. If you have to fight the battle, let the melee units go. Annihilate the Thunderers, Quarrelers if you can, Trollhammer torpedoes for sure, because wasting that ammo legitimately is a pain and they reload slow, so destroy. Wipe out all the Slayer pirates. It's not worth getting your Big Uns slaughtered by Slayers. Put chaff against them and shoot them a lot, and only then melee. It's a war of attrition. This is not something you are going to win pretty. Other general advice, because Azhag really does have immense expansion options. Ungrim declares war on you super fast, even if you trade a settlement to Katarin and have her on your side. And in that case, you're acting like the crocodile who's going to eat Kislev, but just later. Your starting artillery is not Grimgor's Doomdiver Catapult. It's good for whittling down general infantry, but it's not good for busting down walls, not really. Trying a turn 0 siege assault on Fort Jakova is not going to end well. Now, sieging it and letting them sally out and attack you is a fight you can win early. Not necessarily easily, but you can win it. And while you don't have to do this, you should be able to auto-resolve a follow-up attack and trade that settlement to Katarin if you want. But either way, it'll put you in a position to call a loss sooner rather than later for the aforementioned inevitable cage match with Ungrim. And if you can't get that done, well, just be careful. But so early, Ungrim is weak, relatively speaking, and as long as you can destroy his starting army, you've got this. If that takes a while, just larger forces, well, whatever you can do, there are ways. It's just annoying grinding through unbreakable Slayers. Though I've learned from experience, the AI will cheese to get you away from a WA target, so make sure you take the city. Destroying the faction is gravy. I mean, take it or raise it, one way or another. Finally, that 1 unit of dinky trolls you get is really useful and valuable, and you might want more of them later, especially since you need a troll building to get the hags, and unit cap +2 for hags means yes, you'll be getting this building at some point. I personally have a prejudice against putting more than 4 heroes into an army for general use when I'm not trying to doomstack, so I have settled on a Black Orc Big Boss and 2 hags to supplement the starting very valuable shaman. Nurture him well. You don't need to rush Snagla, but he's there to help later. You might want him in your second army rather than your first. If I'm to add something else, since you already start with the Orc building, getting it to tier 2 and getting 1 Black Orc Big Boss also means you can get more Big Uns, but barely need any, and you can get Era Boys. And I know they're not popular with certain people, but for you, in your circumstance, they can be really good, and you're buffing them with the same redline skills as Big Uns, so there. Since Ahzag has a bonus to sacking, you ideally want him taking down big, valuable settlements, and in the long run, Chaos Dwarf capitals are some of the best for this. But any Greenskin lord becomes pretty good at sacking, so for a lot of situations, you do not need to obsess with making Ahzag do it himself. You just need to get sufficient mass onto the field of battle to somehow carry the day. Because, trust me on this, auto-resolve may not hate you quite as bad as some factions, but it still hates you. And you'll gut out some wins that did not seem possible, not because you were the great green tactical genius, but because you lasted. Anyway, once you get out of the earliest game parts and manage the Ungrim situation, Azhag's items, skills, and we're not even talking about his magic right now, turn him into a roving leadership, melee attack, and melee defense buff machine. So as long as you aren't stupid with him, getting him shot out of the air, and so forth. His army is the real power behind him, and it's going to tear down things way above that army's station and gold value. That, and you will conspicuously start with an Orc Shaman who can learn all the great big wasp spells alongside him, so you're not just raising power recharge for Ahzag himself, you're doing it so you can give your foes the foot. Take care and have fun declaring a war on the Tower of Zar Turtle faction, and get dozens of thousands of gold in stock value. Hey, You go where the money is.